are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Danny Smith, and I am the Manager of Events and Marketing at MicroExcel. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Why You Should Turn on Microsoft Teams Today, in which we will discuss how the new app will impact your Office 365 experience and reveal how to easily deploy Microsoft Teams, as well as showcase a live demo. Presenting today is Jonathan Adams, a senior SharePoint consultant and longtime SharePoint addict. John comes to us with over 10 years of experience in SharePoint and leads MicroExcel's managed services team. When he is not sharing or pointing, he likes to write awkward introduction sentences for people to read at public presentations. Just a few laundry items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out in a few days. Also, we will have a Q&A portion at the end, so please type any questions you may have in the questions box, and we will get to those in the order they are received. If you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to contact us at info@microexcel.com. Without further ado, I'd like to present our speaker for today's event, Mr. John Adams.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being a good sport. So, as was mentioned, I'm a senior consultant here running the managed services team. I'm going to go through a lot today. So even though it's recorded, you're probably going to have a lot of questions. I'll answer as many as I can after the presentation, but don't hesitate to reach out to me at any of my information here, my corporate email address. I have a blog that I haven't updated in a while, but still some good stuff out there. And I've just recently come out of hibernation for my Twitter account. And so I'm starting to get really active there at Serious Point. And if you really try and track me down, you can go ahead and follow me, try and find me in Pokemon Go. But you got to be really serious about that to find me. All right. So let's jump right in. What is Microsoft Teams? Okay. Teams is a digital collaborative workspace. It has all these great features, you know, instant messaging, audio, video, shared files, shared everything, a persistent threaded chat. It's available almost universally. You know, your desktops, PC, Mac, web, iOS, Android. There's not many systems that cannot get and utilize Microsoft Teams to its fullest extent. But even beyond that, we have two key features as well. Self-service provisioning. Teams are meant to be, you create them as you need them, you use them, the people that are going to utilize them to their fullest are the ones that are going to be working within them. There's no IT bottleneck. And also, they're extensible. We can add chatbots using the Microsoft Bot framework, add custom tabs, add connectors to bring external information into your Microsoft Teams environment automatically. So all of these together make up our collaborative workspace. Now, when I say universally available, that doesn't mean they all have the same experience, but they do a darn good job. If you look at the desktop platform and you compare it to the web platform, they're literally identical, and you don't lose any functionality. The differences you get, well, those are based on pretty much the way the toasts appear on your screen, and the way the notifications appear. So whether you're using desktop, using the web, or even using the phone, you're not going to be missing out on Teams. Now, when I was going through the features, obviously a lot of that sounded familiar. It should, because we've been using those features in all these social applications that Microsoft has been releasing. Yammer has quite a bit of that functionality. Skype, all that messaging communication functionality. Groups, again, all that shared data functionality. So why are we even talking about Teams? Why did Microsoft release yet another application to throw into the mix and kind of fuddle us up on our internal collaboration strategy? Well, there's a reason for that. What Teams is doing is it's not being designed to replace any of the previous technologies out there from Microsoft. What it's doing is it's building upon them. The same way Office 365 Groups took advantage of Exchange, Teams is taking advantage of Groups. using that existing rich functionality and building upon it to offer a more advanced, streamlined digital workplace. But Teams is actually built on much more than just groups. All the Office 365 offerings, essentially, groups, Power BI, Planner, Skype, and its own native functionality, including the functionality that lets you extend it beyond the current out-of-the-box implementation, all of that makes up Microsoft Teams. So Teams isn't replacing the way you do business today, it's building upon it. And that's a very important concept. So instead of having your users who today, they're used to using Skype, they use email, they use Office 365, all these tools are being used in a very specific way. Introduction of Teams is not meant to disrupt that business process unless you want it disrupted. Okay, there is nothing saying that your users have to stop using Skype, stop using Office 365, and suddenly switch over to Teams. Instead, Teams is there and it can be used with a zero impact footprint on the rest of the organization's business process. So it's literally just a value add. And that's a pretty fantastic win right there. You know, offering a new tool without having to change the way anyone else does their work. Now, you probably want people to adopt Teams, and you can coax them into it, but you are not going to be hurting your organization's day-to-day business process by bringing this new tool on board. So if we take a look at the social ecosystem that Microsoft has in place, everything has a role. There's a reason that nothing is getting phased out, nothing is getting pushed aside, and the strategy starts to become apparent as we look at different products. Starting with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is meant to be your team workspace. It's meant to be fast, informal. It's the place where you do your work day in and day out, do the nitty-gritty, and make that final product happen. Okay? As such, it's targeted towards the small and medium groups. It's not meant for the entire enterprise to get, you know, jammed into one team. It's meant for those teams to work amongst themselves to produce their usual daily effort. Whereas Yammer is more scoped towards a medium and large environment. Yammer is where you want to go when you want to share something with the organization. You want to go ahead and try and find some expertise across the company and engage them in a conversation. Yammer is that go-to enterprise place. As a result, though, it has a more formal tone. I mean, when everyone can see what you're doing, you tend to be a bit more proper and businesslike. In addition, it's a bit slower. As a result, when you have a larger audience, that engagement is bound to happen on a slower pace. So Yammer is meant for your entire company to work and share, whereas Teams is meant for your team to rapidly communicate and collaborate. Okay, so what about groups? Well, groups is what I call the core. Microsoft Teams is built upon groups. Yammer is now integrated heavily with groups. That's slowly rolling out if you haven't gotten it yet in your tenant. So groups have become the center of our two core collaboration platforms. So both the enterprise and your team workspace are utilizing the same core. So we're ending up with, instead of having multiple fractured systems, there's a rhyme and reason. They're centered around the same core, interacting with that core. And while the communications are still siloed, that doesn't mean they always have to be, because they have that common core in place. Skype for Business. Now, Skype for Business is utilized by Teams, but not quite by Yammer yet. But Skype is like a phone call. It's meant for communicating and collaborating at a specific time, and then not persisting that information except maybe throwing it to archive. But Skype interacts with Teams in such a way that the work you do utilizing Skype is maintained as part of your collaboration timeline, and it stays within the context of your Microsoft team. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail in the demo. And finally, Outlook and Exchange. Outlook and Exchange, as I said before, they're the foundation for groups. Email's not going anywhere. Calendars not going anywhere. All that's going to happen is that technology is going to continue to improve and continue to provide smarter versions of its services and provide those services to the other layers that are taking advantage of them. So as I mentioned, everything is sharing Office 365. And if you take a step back, you see everything is touching 365. So almost all our tools out there today are touching 365 groups in one way or another. And so when you think about it in this type of graphic, everything is converging. So even though we might have, little apps here and there, they all share a common core. And what that lets you do is you can incorporate these apps in your workspaces, VMware and Teams. And it also helps facilitate eventually if information is shared between them. But ultimately what it does is if you look at it in a fashion where everything is centering around Office 365, it kind of gives you perspective on the roles of each of these different applications and the roles of Office 365 groups as they relate to all these different pieces of functionality. So when you're talking productivity solutions, especially when you're talking about a digital workplace, you have to talk about Slack. It's the elephant in the room. Slack, HipChat, and the literally hundreds of other clones that exist today pretty much broke open the ground and defined the space that Microsoft Teams is released into. So what's the difference? Why should you choose Teams versus Slack? Well, to be blunt, and I love this quote, Slack is a product, Teams is a feature. Slack, you have to implement, integrate, all that fun stuff. Teams is already part of your Office 365 offering. If you have a business plan or greater, you have Microsoft Teams. And you know how much you pay for that? Nothing extra. It's just a value add. So the same way you don't have to interrupt your day-to-day business process is the same way that you don't have to suddenly turn your IT team on its head with a new technology. It's just there, and it works. And in fact, Slack is the one who's actually playing some catch-up now. Slack recently released their enterprise grid in an attempt to try and break into the space of medium to larger enterprises for social collaboration and digital collaboration. Okay, so that's enough of me rambling for a PowerPoint slide at least, and now I'm going to ramble in a live demo. So let's take a break and look at Teams itself, okay? The core experience in Teams is what you see here. Each team, every time you create a team, on the back end you create a group. So teams and groups, one-to-one correlation. But within Teams, you have what are called channels. Now, one way to consider channels, and actually the way it's actually implemented is a channel is a folder. You're not, every channel, you can decide I want to create a different task plan, your files seem segregated, but in reality, they're just folders within your group. So your group is maintaining its unity for the data. The data is not being fractured around the team, but it's still being sorted and organized based on your channel structure. And also you see here, so I'll click into Notes. OneNote Online. Again, we're utilizing those services from groups. We're not replacing anything. Files, same thing. File storage is literally you're using the group's files. But conversations, totally different. This is where they start to get you. When Microsoft wanted to create this product, they wanted a totally different chat experience. They realized that what they had today wasn't going to handle the needs to have a truly collaborative and heavy chat workplace. So they created their own chat, their own instant messaging with Microsoft Teams. So the conversations that you have within your department and within your channels They do not echo into your Microsoft group. They're segregated. The other big difference here is these chats are meant to be fun and informal. But at the same time, as information is shared, it's grabbed, saved, and also the context it's used in is saved. So for example, I want to discuss this webinar. So I've uploaded it. What that lets us do is when you upload a document, you upload a PDF, right into the channel stream, it lets you review it, you can edit it, you're taking advantage of the apps online, in this case PowerPoint online, and you also have the ability to, again, engage that digital collaboration. A chat stream surrounding your document exists. And even after you're done modifying the document with chat, that chat is preserved in your overall channel conversation. So nothing is really lost, and that's the whole thing that they're doing here. Persistent conversation, but not just that, it's your work is persistent. If I come in next week and I find out that there was edits to the document, I have no idea what was behind these edits. But if I go through and I take a look at the document in Microsoft Teams, I can go ahead and look at the conversation that occurred with it. And now suddenly I understand. I come in and I realize I missed a meeting. Well, I can still take a look and see what chat happened during the meeting, see who was participating, because that, again, the context is saved. The meeting occurred as part of Microsoft Teams, and Teams made sure that that activity and everything surrounding it that could be captured and it was maintained in your conversation. Now, this would not be, really, this is all great, but if you couldn't customize it, it would be a bit awkward. Luckily, not luckily, smartly, you can, on a per channel basis, customize what are called the tabs. Basically what applications are immediately available to you in your channel. So of course you have all the Office web apps online, but you also have the Visual Studio Online, which is team services. You have your tasks and planner, the ability to upload PDFs directly as well. And those will then be shown just like you saw with the PowerPoint document, where you can review them, edit them as needed, and maintain a collaboration, maintain that chat around them so that you're never just working in a silo, then sending it for review. It's a constant iterative process. Microsoft really wants you to do everything that you need to do through Workspace. Because when you leave Workspace, all that work you do outside, when you leave Microsoft Teams, all that work you do outside the Workspace is lost. Because it's not done within the context of your collaboration. So the more we can do within this tool, the more productive we're going to be. But besides just the teams and the channels and the conversations, there's also, of course, chat, meetings, and files, as you see on the left-hand side. So those are all unique as well. So chat, again, as I mentioned, chat is actually its own chat system. It just integrates extremely well and hilariously, depending on how your organization or team decides to communicate. So it integrates really well with Skype to the point where it seems seamless. In fact, I have two different conversations. Here I'm talking to my colleague Michael, and this is the Microsoft Teams to Microsoft Teams chat. Besides the standard Teams chat format, you see I can go ahead, if I feel a little curious, I might communicate that with a meme because I find memes hilarious. And in addition, you'll see up top, just like with our channel, we have all these different tabs for files, notes, activity. So essentially, even our contacts when we're working one-on-one with a user or one-to-many if we're dealing with a group chat, that's still maintained. So persistent chat is not limited to the teams in the channel, but it exists as well for those one-on-one chats with your teammates. Now, not everyone is going to use Microsoft Teams. That's part of the point, right? You don't have to say, we're changing our instant messaging strategy. Everyone has to use this new client. No, that's one of the advantages. People can maintain their existing business process while others can adapt and use this new tool. So a key part of that is going to be Skype. So when you communicate with the Skype user, it's essentially seamless to the Skype user, but to a Teams user, you lose some functionality. You don't have those tabs up top to maintain contact and information to persist over a long period of time. The chat will persist, but not the other pieces of information that would otherwise be available to you. Likewise, you'll notice I lose all my fun memes and emoji. Well, you're interfacing with Skype. The core is chat. So you do lose some functionality when you do a Skype to Teams discussion. But you don't lose any core functionality that will prevent you from collaborating the way you would day to day. Similarly, we have meetings. So meetings, we see all our Exchange meetings, we see our group meetings just like we would expect to. But Microsoft Teams meetings are still different than the meetings that we have from Exchange or from groups. So for example, here I have a meeting. I could join it. It's a normal everyday Skype meeting. Now to show you the difference, I'm going to create a Microsoft Teams meeting. First thing to note is that you don't select a location, you select a channel. Again, this is your workplace. This is where they mean for you to do your day-to-day work. So if you're going to meet as a team, you're going to meet in a specific channel. And that means that the meeting that you're holding will be done within the context of that channel. Not only that, but this is a giveaway, really. This is a Teams meeting. Everyone can join online. So when you schedule a Teams meeting, it doesn't schedule a Skype meeting or a Skype call. Instead, it's a Teams meeting that's meant to be joined online. Now this looks very familiar, right? Skype call, same pretty handsome face, all that same great functionality. What's different though is the chat contact that appears. Let me go ahead and show you again. So when you're in the meeting, besides just the member list, you have a chat context. And what's different between this and Skype, besides my lack of typing skills, is that when the meeting is over, why the meeting was held, where it was held within the timeline, what was typed during the meeting is not lost. It's maintained as a series of actions and your chat as conversation within your main chat. So suddenly having a meeting isn't a matter of going back in your calendar and trying to figure out where that meeting happened or trying to dig through your conversation history. Microsoft Teams is letting all that information automatically be applied to the context that you require. So suddenly when you're looking for your chat notes, you're not looking based on the folder. You're looking in Teams in the channel where all your normal collaboration occurs for that topic. And similarly for files. So for files, as I mentioned before, channels can be considered like a folder. But as we upload files directly into chat, of course we have to wonder, where are those files going? Are they getting, are they just poof disappearing after the chat's gone? Well, no. Microsoft Teams is making sure that any file that's uploaded into chat is maintained in that Teams file repository, in your Office 365 Groups file repository. So you don't have to worry about when you share a document midstream, that document might then not show up later down the road. You're actually adding it to your company's, to your team's, working file store at the same time as you're just collaborating on it. So Teams is smart enough to separate those. So this is Teams in a nutshell, where it lets you, oh, I'm looking for files. That's the button I'm looking for. So where it lets you maintain your same day-to-day operations, just in a new workspace with new abilities that really enhance the overall collaboration and makes it so you don't lose track of where you are. And it doesn't lose track of what you've done. Very useful. Plus, and I am very happy about this, it is officially the first Microsoft program with an integrated meme builder. I find that essential to my day-to-day work. Grumpy Cat no longer has to live in Microsoft Teams. I'm going to jump back to my slides. Oh, actually, so I've shown you all the features, but I want to show you a quick sample of what we can do when we decide to take the Microsoft Teams and through some very simple out-of-the-box actions, convert it into a full business process solution. So, in this example, and let me get rid of the memes here, let's take a look at our product development site. So the scenario is that we're working for a company, down-to-earth, modern organics. Our company operates in a very simple fashion. We use SharePoint Online to track our products using individual product pages, submit new ideas for enterprise feedback, and to gather forms for product evaluation. Okay? So normally we'd have to jump between collaboration solutions. Maybe we'll chat in Skype, and then we'll go to SharePoint, and then we'll find a document, we'll share that via Skype. We're constantly changing our context, but we don't have to do that way now. With Microsoft Teams, we can stay in the same context and track our activity. So the normal, let's say we want to create a new idea. So first we have to submit that idea. By adding a tab with just that simple SharePoint form, now we not only are able to submit a new idea from the context, but we can also then start collaboration about the page itself. So we're suddenly adding collaboration abilities where there was none before, and we're keeping all that within the context of our teams and channels. Now for this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say honey shampoo. Our brands are dictated by the key ingredient, so honey. So I submit my idea. Let's say we go ahead and we let it, simmer for a bit. We let the company think about it, and then we want to review the ideas. Again, we don't want to have to leave our workplace and lose that context. So we have a tab, Review Idea Submissions. Right here, you can go ahead, see who likes it, how many times, why not, and at the same time, we can have our own chat. Since these tabs are based on the tab, so the chats are based on the tabs are based on the channel. So that means that these chats around a specific tab are in the context of that given channel. Basically, you don't have to worry about streams getting crossed. When you're chatting here, even if somebody else has this tab, the chat is about this tab for this product in this case, or in general in this case. And just like with the meetings, those chats, those conversations that are occurring on a tab are maintained and visible, exposed in the main conversation timeline. So I'm an executive. Let's say I decide that this new honey shampoo idea is a wave of the future. I don't use Microsoft Teams though. I don't have to. Instead, I'm just going to go, like I normally would, I'm going to go into the idea and I'm going to say I promote it to a product. I'm going to change that from no to yes. So right now we're out of luck, right? I mean, so a change was made on SharePoint. It wasn't made through Teams. It was totally outside of our context. How will we ever know about it? Well, that's where the extensibility comes into play. Using connectors, which is one of those 3 types of extensibility, that lets external information get injected right into your workspace as you're working. So in this case, all right, Honey Shampoo, it was promoted to a full product. And as always, we're subject to timers that decide if they want to trigger or not. So the timer hasn't run yet. But so the information about that product being approved is going to pop in to Honey Shampoo. It's going to tell us that this activity occurred, and now here's a suggested action that you can take. All very simple and nearly out of the box. The only not out of the box is I use an in-text workflow to make a web call instead of using SharePoint Designer. Instead of making everyone wait for the timer service, I'll scroll up to the example that the webhook will return. Oh, never mind. There it is. Congratulations. Your idea is promoted to a product, and it gives us an action that we can then take. So that's not just the core feature of the Teams, but that's also just a small use case scenario where we can take advantage of staying in our workplace, keeping all the content in context, but not missing out on core events that are happening outside of our collaboration area. So I'm going to jump back into the deck for just a minute. So nothing is perfect, right? Especially when it's a preview. And that's true for Microsoft Teams as well. So what we are seeing is, right now you can't have external participants. This is a guaranteed feature, just not implemented. Teams can't be created centrally by an admin. They have to be created within Teams themselves, ad hoc. No PowerShell support, no fine-grained control. You can turn it on or off Teams. Although I do want to say, if you want to control the creation of Teams, because they are dependent on Microsoft Groups, your policies that control the creation of groups will work for Microsoft Teams. Yammer groups right now cannot be activated into Teams. I mean, they were just integrated into Office 365. They probably want to, sit and enjoy that for a bit. And as I mentioned as well, they're a different scope and scale. They're targeting a different audience for what they're doing. And there's one feature/bug right now, and that's regarding Planner. So Planner is the exact same planner that you have in Office 365. You create tasks, it looks like a Kanban board, new buckets, exact same thing with a slightly different interface. But the problem is the the plans you create from Microsoft Teams are not exposed in Office 365 Planner, and vice versa. Now, tasks, however, are. So if there's a task created in Teams assigned to you, you go to your Office 365 Planner, you will see that task, but you will not see the plan. And when you change that task, you'll see it reflected in Teams. What's essentially happening is, because there's a one-to-one correlation between groups and their plans, these plans that are created by Teams are being filtered out. So there is an update coming to Microsoft Groups that's going to allow for multiple plans to be associated with the group. And when that gets rolled out, then you'll have access to the core plan from the Office 365 group, and the group will have access to your team plan. But for right now, they're segregated. Plans in Teams are only visible in Teams, and group plan is only visible to the group. There's capacity restrictions. Now, I'm not going to go through all this for the sake of time, but if you take a look, you see these restrictions kind of force you into that small to medium area for collaboration. So Yammer is there for the rest of it. Now, if you have a small number of people on Yammer and you have a large number of people in Microsoft Teams, you have a gray area of which tool to use. And the answer is, it depends. It depends on you, your business, and what your users decide fits them the best. Microsoft is not saying that there's a one-size-fits-all. They want you to have all the options you can, but they still want them to share the same common elements. And that's the way they've designed this system. There are restrictions as well based on how you are using your tools. So you need Office 365 to use Teams. That's a given. You have to have a business plan or higher. However, just because you have Office 365 doesn't mean you're using it in the same way as everyone else. If you're using online dedicated or on-prem for Exchange, you're going to be losing some functionality. Not all of it. You can still use Teams just fine, but you'll be losing some minor functionality. Same thing as if you're using Skype for Business on-prem. Because Teams is using its own chat, some interaction will work and some will not when trying to communicate with Skype for Business on-prem. So this over here, it was an image shared by Microsoft in their tech community. It explains kind of the limitations, but it's also a little convoluted. So I recommend going through it and joining the tech community if you have any additional questions about potential conflicts between on-prem Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams. And lastly, all this data, it is Office 365 Tier C compliant. So what that means is it's very secure. It's secured based on the standards on the left, and it also means that you're staying in the security compliance when you have these services on the right enabled. But in short, it's secure. It's the same way you trust Office 365 groups, that trust can be mirrored to Microsoft Teams. So let me show you about extending Teams for a second. We have only like 5 or 10 minutes, about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to go through this a little quickly. So I'm going to jump into Teams. So as I mentioned, there are 3 different ways to extend. There's a chatbot, there are connectors, and there are tabs. So I'm going to go through those. So chatbots. Let's start with chatbots. Chatbots are always represented by a hexagonal icon with no mood data. Okay. Now, excuse me. What I really like about chatbots is they're external. Just like the SharePoint app model, these apps are hosted externally, and you communicate with them, and they're not restricted to Microsoft Teams. It's the same bot framework that's used for Skype, for even Slack integration, Facebook Messenger. You are not restricting yourself by developing a bot for Teams. That bot is going to be accessible through multiple different communication channels. It's just, well, personally, I like Teams. So it can be used for a one-on-one chat in Teams, and it can be used in a channel in Teams. Right now, the only restriction for chatbots is it cannot do group chat. So while it can be in the Teams channel, it can't be in a multi-person Skype chat. So in this case, this is a quick proof of concept bot that we had drafted up. I want to go ahead and see, again, going back to our demo, I want to find out what ideas have been created recently. So let's ask it, were there any ideas created in the past 10 days called Honey? So what it's doing is it's searching my SharePoint Online environment. It's going through and it's returning search results that match that keyword I gave it. So what we're seeing is, again, not having to break context, not having to leave our workspace. I can, in line with my collaboration, query structured data over in SharePoint Online without ever having to leave the context of the chat. And so that's fantastic. No jumping back and forth to do a search. The fact that I did a search and that what the results were are all captured with this chatbot. And this chatbot was built in a day or two. Now what you will see is it's not very sexy. There's no graphic. You can send some graphics, but the way the chatbots operate and the way most of these extensions operate is that it's sending a JSON packet with information. So you're not really having a lot of control. Microsoft is determining what your cards look like. All you're doing is you're determining what data is getting sent to those cards to be rendered. There's more than one card to choose from. There's different formats and optional values you can put in these cards. But you're not sitting here with CSS and HTML drafting what is going to be appearing in this chat. That's all handled for you. And then we can jump into Teams. So custom tabs. Now, you're probably asking, why do I even need custom tabs, right? If you can just add a website, then what's the point of having a custom tab? Well, the custom tab is more than just a link. A tab lets you also do additional configuration, additional authentication to a source as part of this addition, adding the tab to availability. So one of the samples they provide is for a simple Maps tab. That tab I've already uploaded and I have available. I'm going to add that tab, and you see it's prompting me for configuration data information before it's even created. So I could say this is a Google Maps tab, or this is a Bing Maps tab, or alternatively, I could be saying this is a tab that's going to be relating to a specific part of a third-party product. You have a lot of flexibility here in how you're using these tabs and what these tabs are doing to access other content or systems. So I'm just going to go ahead and save that tab. It's going to send a notification to the channel. And now we have that map, the full functionality interaction that we get from Bing Maps, plus the collaboration and context that is offered by Microsoft Teams. And let me just go back to the conversation. And just like we saw with submit an idea, any of the tabs we added, that new custom tab, despite it having increased functionality, despite it taking configuration input, it functions the same way, where the collaboration stays within context. And then we have, lastly, we have connectors. And as I mentioned, connectors are used to have external content injected into your current collaboration environment in that same context. One example is what I just showed with the demo, with what's called a webhook. So I configured a webhook so that when SharePoint was ready with an event, it would inject a message into our collaboration. Awesome. But you can do a lot more than that. And there's a lot of pre-created, there's a lot of professional services that have created connectors that are already integrated with Microsoft Teams. For example, Zendesk. So Zendesk, if you're not familiar with it, is a help desk ticketing software. But what it has is it has a connector. So here I've created a Zendesk entry and I've submitted a ticket. I get the ticket, I get who requested it, and I see, okay, this is popping up, it's urgent, and I can go then click on View in Zendesk and address the issue right away. In addition, I see the progress the ticket is making. It keeps injecting the status updates to that ticket because that ticket's been assigned to me. So suddenly we're looking at, instead of having to live in Zendesk, instead of having to live inside our email, inside our collaboration stream, we're getting these active updates from other applications. And, of course, it's not limited to just productive applications. Say you have Twitter. A lot of times you're monitoring Twitter for new announcements from Microsoft, for example, or from your competitor. In this case, I set up a connector so that I would hear every time evil competitor decides to tweet. So we see evil competitor is releasing a new generic product on 7-Eleven. Well, this is something I should look into. Do we have something that competes? Do we have to create a counter marketing campaign to work with that? I know, and I can immediately start collaborating with my peers in line right on top of that tweet. I'm just going to go back to my presentation one last time, I promise. So that's Microsoft Teams in a nutshell. It's a fraction of what can really be done with it, but you can already see the power that it's offering and the capabilities it will provide your team to further enable collaboration and not disrupt the business process of others while they do so. So with that, I've listed a ton of additional resources here. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to contact me at the information from the beginning of the deck. If you want to provide feedback or if you want to get input and you're having trouble getting Microsoft Teams to work, the community forums is the place to go. Microsoft is extremely active there, and there's some fantastic participation. If you want to guide how Microsoft Teams is developed, then you want to go here to the product feedback. The user voice is what they're listening to. It's where everyone is being guided to for feedback on how Teams should evolve. So that's my presentation for today. I thank you all for listening. I'm going to hand it back to Danny and for any questions that people might have.
Thank you, John. It looks like we have had a few questions come through during your presentation. So we'll go ahead and start with the first, which is what Microsoft products integrate or are planned for integration with Teams? Teams Foundation, for example.
So Team Foundation on-prem, I'm sure you can create a connector for or a tab for, but I'm not aware of it integrating. Visual Studio Online is available already as the Team Services tab. And the full Office 365 offering, all of those are available as tabs, as well as a custom website, YouTube, Stream, not Sway yet, but that doesn't mean you can't just add it as a standard tab. Now, the fact that it's so flexible means that anything you have can be integrated. So Teams right now, they recently on February 16th, they added the Microsoft Stream and they added the website tab. So those give you a ton of ability to start adding in your own applications. As for what they're doing in terms of integration, we don't have a clear handle on that yet. They're trying to tackle a lot of core issues for the application itself. They're looking at notifications. They're looking at some bugs that have cropped up. They're looking at content displaying, like with the revising the cards, as well as for getting inline code formatting working. So there's a lot of nice bells and whistles as well as improvement going on, but integration with external features is really being left to those third parties because the tools are out there to use.
Okay, thank you, John. Another question we've had come through is when you chat in Teams, do people get notified right away like Skype?
So those notifications are in flux. If you're doing a one-on-one chat, yeah, you get the toast pop up, boom, right away like with Skype. But if you're doing a chat within a Microsoft Teams channel, those notifications aren't creating a toast, even if you have a mention. So that's gotten a lot of feedback that they want these notifications to happen, and I'm sure we'll see improvement moving forward. But right now, one-on-one chats, group chats, absolutely, you get your notification right away. The channel notifications, those need a little bit of improvement.
Okay, thank you. Another question we've had come through is are teams and groups always one-to-one?
Yes. They are always one-to-one, absolutely.
Okay. And another question is, can you delete conversations in Teams?
No. No, you cannot. That's also been commented on. I wouldn't be surprised to see a feature come later for that. But right now, everything is maintained. Your own chat, anything you post or upload, you have 24 hours to edit or delete. But after 24 hours, that conversation is there, and it's stuck there.
Okay, thank you. And so we'll give everyone time to get questions in, but we do have one last one that's came through already. What is the capacity of Microsoft Teams? How many unique teams can be made or channels within a team?
Well, if I go back to my earlier slide, way back here, oh, there it is. So you can have a ridiculous amount of teams, 500,000 right now is the default. But if you're just a standard user, you can only create 250. So your average user isn't going to be able to just create some infinite loop and max out your capacity. However, your global admins are unlimited. They can max out your total capacity for teams. So if you hit 250 teams created as a user, you either have to clear out some old ones, and that brings in compliance issues, which they're, again, bringing those services up to par for the tool, or you need to have a global admin step in and make that team for you.
Great, thank you, John. It looks like there are no more questions, so this will conclude today's webinar. A recording of this will be sent to all participants. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please email info@microexcel.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.